Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we build a Django app. I'm going to continue on my journaling app that I've been building, and we've been making a lot of good progress. The site is live, and we have some final work to do to actually finish the full loop of stuff that needs to happen to make the app go and be usable. And we're going to continue on that this evening. You're welcome to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development, as that's what I'm here for. Otherwise, we'll just jump right into the project. For those that haven't joined before, this is part 15 of a project where I put every bit of code for this project is done live on stream. I don't do anything offline. The one time I did, I waited to commit it before it was a one-line change, and waited to commit it and showed it on stream before I did that. But I try and do everything so that you can see it, so you can see how an app is built and makes it to the internet and all of the nitty-gritty that goes along with that. It's not always a glamorous process, but that's what it takes to build a software as a service on the internet. So we walk through this journey, and we're going to continue on this with this portion of this journaling service. So it's a journaling service that works via email. The core premise is it will send an email daily to a user as a prompt to say, hey, how was your day? And somebody can respond to that. But the hook that makes it more interesting is that each of those prompts that get sent out includes a random past entry that was submitted before. So the more time you spend with the service, you get more and more interesting entries from your past. So I have a service that is similar to this that I'm actually cloning, and it's been pretty cool to have 7 years worth of history in there. You get a random entry from years ago, and you're like, oh, I remember that a long time ago. So that's what we're building. We last time were working through how do we correlate a prompt, the thing that gets sent out. I can bring up our Excalidraw diagram. The thing that gets sent out to SendGrid and ends up in somebody's email inbox. Is there a way that we can correlate that with the response that comes back in, gets sent to SendGrid, gets sent over the internet, and comes to a webhook that we have on our side? And I did some research. We tried a bunch of things, and we didn't have much success with the results. So I did some research offline. And so let's talk through that, what I found, and then move forward based on that. The short answer is, well, let's read what we have here. So, and in fact, it's been a little while since I've done this. So let's see what I wrote and see if it makes sense still. This is a couple of weeks later now since I've done this last. So we are trying to parse everything out of the receiver message in order to build a journal entry. That is, so the data that comes back into the webhook should have the user's email. We need to figure that out. We seem to be missing data. The metadata that we attached does show up in the sent email, so we checked that on SendGrid, which is our email service provider that we're using, but it doesn't appear to be in the WSGI request. So the response that comes back in did not have the data that went out. So we sent some data out, we sent out some metadata attributes that we attached to it, and we could see in SendGrid the things that they sent to the email inbox, we could see like it had a date associated with it. But what comes back on this response path does not include that same metadata date. So I did my homework and found some things out here. So is there any mechanism to have the data transferred? And here is the ultimate answer. The answer is no. Nothing that I could find about email clients are guaranteed to return any metadata. So in the past, we've talked about HTTP requests and how you have in a request, you have like the main body of the request that is what a browser is meant to display and render. That's the HTML content. And then you can have HTTP headers, which is kind of the hidden metadata that a browser makes extensive use of, but you as a user don't really necessarily know about. And the actual email specification, so there's a specification that backs up what it means to be an email on the internet, does say that you can do headers. There's a bunch of them, in fact, describing to and from and all the sort of things that you would expect with email. And there's this notion of custom email headers that can be added. The problem with this pattern, and the reason we can't rely on it, is we can't trust that the email client is going to return that. So let's say that we added an email header, an extra email header, and we're able to send that to SendGrid. and with the hope that what gets sent to the email client, in case like a Gmail kind of thing, would also include that header. The challenge is that nobody on the Google team has the direct responsibility to return your custom headers back to you. And that's just Gmail. Like all of the email clients would have that problem. So because of that, we can't trust that the headers will be there, and we really can't rely on that. So the only thing that we can rely on is the actual content of the message. And there's two places that we have content. One is the body of the message. The other is the subject. And there's kind of the two line is sort of in our control. So let's read the second bullet here. From the info, does that make sense? From the info, the receiver message, maybe the info of the receiver message, could we find an ID or, okay. So I think I meant to write from the information in the receiver message. That's really confusing. So I'm going to correct that because I'm going to read that later and be like, what? So this is talking about the message gets sent back to the webhook. So when somebody hits the reply on their email prompt and says, hey, I've got my journal entry, and SendGrid gets that and then sends it to us because we've hooked up inbound parse, which is a feature from SendGrid. When we have this data that flows back into the Django app, that message payload does not include a bunch of extra data. So it doesn't, I looked at what's included and it doesn't have any kind of ID. Well, there is an ID, but it's only associated with the reply. So there's a disconnect at the SendGrid level, that there's no correlation, no direct correlation anyway, between the sent email that went out of our app and the reply email. Those are two distinct email message identifiers. So there's no method for us to then take an ID and find some kind of correlation and look up the originating message and then figure out the metadata from that. So that path that I had proposed as a possible solution of doing more work on the backend side to go see if we can find the message is also not possible based on my research. So that left us with the final option, which is the one I was least enthused about, but I think that's where we are, which is to say that we need to parse the information we need out of the response. And I actually went and I looked at the service that I'm trying to clone and make sure I didn't miss anything. And to not my surprise at this point, it confirmed what I had discovered, which is they were doing the same thing. They were parsing the date out of the subject line of the prompt to get which date should it be applied for. And then they were doing a little bit of extra stuff, which I found clever, that I think we're going to apply here as well, because there's another challenge here. And that challenge has to do with how do you make sure for certain that the response you're getting is from the email address that's associated with the service's account. So I'm going to actually, I'm not going to put it in the chat because the chat doesn't show up later in the recording. So let me put it on the terminal here. So let's say that we have a user of the service, and the user, we'll call him Bob. And so Bob signed up for Journey Inbox with Bob at mydomain.com. I'm not even going to pick like Gmail or anything. So that's where they picked this from. And go away, whatever this little prompt is. So that's where Bob signed up from. And that's the email that we have on record for Bob. But email clients have some funny options to them. So we could have our prompt messages could be going to Bob at mydomain.com. And so that's cool. We get it to Bob, and Bob receives it at his email client. But clients can do this kind of tricky thing where maybe Bob's got his own fish business, I'll say. So maybe sometimes Bob wants to reply at a different email address. So Bob at Bob's Awesome Fish Store.com. So that's how Bob replied. If we got the reply from SendGrid and we had this as the from address. So this is what came in as the from. We'd run into a real problem because what we have in our system is bob@mydomain.com, and we don't have bob at bobsawesomefishstore.com. So that's a challenge that is going to prevent our looking up feature of our user information from being like truly bulletproof. But we have a way to control this. And this is the technique that I picked up from that other service that I thought was pretty clever. And I saw it somewhere. It wasn't just the service. I saw it on Stack Overflow somewhere. I thought it was pretty cool. As I was searching for features of how do you do strong association. So the trick was this. The trick was basically in the to, who you're replying to, or who the prompt. Sorry, that's backwards. And it's all a matter of perspective. So let's say we've got our prompt email has a bunch of things, right? It has the subject, it has who it's to, which case this is Bob in our example, and who it's from, which would be us, Journey Inbox. Right? And so currently in what I've been doing with the job that we have, let's go take a look at it really quickly. You can see that the to, or sorry, the from is us. We have this constant of this email SendGrid reply to. I don't know why I can't go to that definition there. That's weird. Sorry, y'all. 1 second. What is going on? Why is my stack not working? Oh, goodness. It's been a while since I've been doing some direct coding, so apologies. But if we look down at our reply to, this is a setting that I'd put in here. And I'd made it configurable because I thought we might need to for testing purposes. But it's something to the effect of right now, journal at email.journeyinbox.com. So that's who the from is coming from currently. And then when it shows up in the client, because I'm not doing certain notification, it doesn't look like it's coming from Journey Inbox. It looks like it's coming from the username is often reported as journal. So here's the trick. We, on the receiving end, what we really care about is being sent to email.journeyinbox.com. And we have all of our DNS configuration hooked up to receive anything. So this part on this side, journal, doesn't really matter, which means that this chunk of the email address is configurable. That's an important thing to note. So if we want to guarantee as best we can that we're getting it from the same user, what we can do is something like this. What we can do is we can make our from address look like journal, and then this format doesn't matter, it's just the format that I had in my head, journal, and then some user ID hash code at email.journeyinbox.com. And in all likelihood, the user of the service is not very, it's unlikely that it would change this key. Like if you receive an email message from somebody, you would expect in a reply that you would send it to the same email address. And if you monkeyed with that and fiddled with that character and deleted something, you wouldn't have the confidence that you were going to send it back to the right place. So you're likely not going to touch that, which means that behaviorally, this thing can be viewed as a constant. And the nice part is that if we have this hash ID, then when it comes back to our receiver hook, which we have in our entries app as receivers. So here in this data payload, we could look up from address, and the from address is going to have journal dot some user hash code at email.journeyin.box.com. And we can parse out that user hash code. So we can take out this piece of information here and view this, view this chunk right here, which, we would do some sort of hash would so be like some characters and some numbers. It's going to be something that people aren't going to want to fiddle with. They would be like, I don't know what that is. I'm just going to leave it. And from that ID, we could look up the user. And that saves us from this problem down here. So if we have Bob could respond and he could say, I'm going to write as bob@mydomain.com, or I'm going to write as bob@bobsawesomefishstore.com. And either way, we successfully parse the message and associate it with Bob's journal because we have a stronger connection with the record based on this user ID hash. All right, so that is a strategy that I'm planning to employ as we send this stuff out, and so that as we get it on the receiver side, we can parse it and do the right association. And that gives us the benefit of, like, I don't have to look up anything by email. I don't have to trust any email address that's sent to me. I only have to trust these user ID hashes. And the only way somebody's going to get one of these hashes is really by looking up or receiving this in their inbox. And yeah, there's the possibility that somebody could somehow intercept the from address and then figure out that hash and I suppose respond to that. So it's not like this is perfect security in that regard, but we're going to do the best we can in this way. So this is almost like a secret, and maybe if there's other things that we can do to make this more secure, we'll look into that. But I think this is going to be a pretty secure path. So that's what I discovered. So we have to do some other things to make sure along the way here that I've got. So I'm not going to check this until we do these things because I think that's going to be critical. And you can see I've already thought about this and wrote this down. So if you're reading these line item boxes, that's what these are for. So the first thing we need to change is we need to change our prompt date. So since we have to go by the subject now, like previously I was planning to send the metadata as the full year in a very parsable format so that I could just pull out the date very concretely. But that only works with the to message. So we could send that to SendGrid, but it's not going to do any good on the receiving side on the other way. So the way that we're going to get the date out of this, because if you remember, the things that we need out of our message in total is the body of the message. Whoops, delete this as old. Is the body of the message, the content, and then we need the, where to go? We need the date, the when, and we need the user. Those are the three elements that are really vital to this process. So we're going to get the when from the subject line. That'll be the source of that. And we could get this and make some assumption here if we did the current format of October 18th. This is the last time I streamed. We could assume that that's 2023. But there's a problem here on that edge case. And that edge case is, let's say that this said actually December 31st. And the user didn't reply until the following year, which is a totally realistic thing to do. Like, you're not guaranteed to get to your last journal entry at the last day of the year. Maybe you're going to a New Year's Eve party or something like that. Who cares what you're doing? But there's no guarantee that's going to come in on that. So if the year rolls over and we were stupid about it, then we would be associating December 31st entries with the following year of 2024. And that is definitely not what we want. So you could either make some heuristic guesses of, hey, when was this message received, and associate it with that, and check the year boundary and like do some make some unusual assumptions. Or the simpler thing to do is bake in the year into the actual message. So if we said instead October 18th, 2023, it's a little bit more verbose. It's maybe not as friendly, but you can very clearly, from this part right here alone, get a pattern that will guarantee you to get the year, the month, and the date. Okay, so that's the first change we're going to make. Let's get rid of all of this stuff down here, and I'm realizing that I also have this duplicated on here. So we actually need to go to the job side, because this is where we need to really be working, and we're not on the receiver yet. We'll come back to this later. Okay, so first thing we want to change is to include the year, and we've got a test for these jobs, so let's do that too. So let's go to entries, test, jobs. Our good trustworthy test for this. And we want to have, so we've got our date frozen up here from when we first coded this back in July. It's been a while since we started this. It's pretty shocking, actually. So really we want to change this to July 19th, and then I want to extend it with the year, 2023. All right, so if I run these tests should fail now because it doesn't include the year. We come over here and we need to, it's a format string. I always forget what the format strings are for year. Let's just fiddle with it. We'll see if we can guess it right. I think it's capital Y, but let's do comma, today, percent Y. See if that's it. All right, that seems to be it. What if I put lowercase y? What does that do? No, that just does the short 2-digit year. So the 4-digit year is capital Y. Okay, cool. So that change was really trivial, which will enable us to do that parsing later very cleanly. Kind of inverse, essentially do the inverse on this %B, %-d, and %y stuff. So let's check that box off. Now the second box here is going to take considerably more time, because where do we get these hashes from? We need a tool for that. And we need to change some aspect of our setup to make this work the way that we would want. And I think what I want to do, go to Django packages and bring up the project. What we want to search for is this project right here, Django hashids. A great project. I think this is the one. Just confirm before I say something that I regret. Well, these look right. Yeah. Okay. So let me check one thing. I'm going to check something in my homeschool app because I use this in my homeschool app as well. So let's go over here and look at a models file and search for hashid. Hashid field salt. Why is my go to definition not working? That's not cool. Oh, maybe I just can't figure that one out because it's so dynamic. Okay. Yep. The project rename? Maybe it did. I want to confirm this is the right one. Might not be the right one. All right, hold on. Let me make sure I'm not misleading us. Django hashid field. This is something different. Hash ID. What? Why is that not on Django packages? Django hash ID field. They're both. What's the difference between these? I mean, they're just different by different people, I guess, but I'm wondering why the one of them is not on Django packages. I use this one, which appears to not be on Django packages, which is very surprising. So how about if I search for the whole thing? Hash ID. Wow. What's going on there? Okay. Let's compare them. I'm curious to the differences. I'm probably going to use Django hash ID field, but maybe there's a reason why there's only one here. Maybe one's more popular than the other. Because even this one would indicate to me that it's not as mature at 0.7, although that's just me reading into version numbers. This has a release history dating back to 2016, and this has back to 2020. So clearly the hash IDs is newer. Doesn't mean new, but newer doesn't mean better. And yeah, this is the one I expected. Let's check out, make sure that this one's still being maintained, which as far as I know it would be. Okay. Yeah, this is the right one to use. What does this one have in it? Let's check it out briefly. That's the one we just used. Django hash IDs. It certainly seems simpler. I don't know if it's trading simplicity for power. All right, let's talk about the concept though. I'm going to use this one because I trust it more. Actually, one more time. Sorry, one more validation that I want to check. What is the reputation of this one? Yeah, this one's used way less. 32 stars versus 356. It's not a knock on the project. A star doesn't necessarily mean quality, but I'm just trying to get a sense of the differences here. Let's camp out on what this is about, and then we'll talk about how we use it. So the idea behind the hash ID field is what it does is it acts as a translation layer. And a hash, if you're not familiar with it, is a function that you can run on any sort of input and produce a derivative output. And the aspect about this relationship is that it's not really reversible. So is that a true statement? It's not. Yeah, because you can take totally. Sorry, I was wondering how lookup works here, but I'm not going to fret about it too much. So you take some content, you put it through a hash function, and you can generate a hash. And this can work for any volume of content. Like you can, and this is the way some validation of some stuff works, is like if you download a package, you can calculate a SHA-256, which is a kind of a hash function, which essentially takes all the content and distills it down to some sort of, essentially, you can think of like a fingerprint of what is this thing. And it's a way to do validation that your input will map to your output. And there's a certain amount of uniqueness. There's a way to do collisions, but most entries are going to produce a unique hash, especially given a certain size. So hashes are useful as a way to not perfectly obscure, but as a way to hide the actual input value. So you can't work backwards. You can't take a hash typically and then go and produce a new value out of or the original content. That makes sense. Like if you have a 6 gigabyte file that you pass through a hashing algorithm and it gives you 40 characters of or 48 or however many characters of it is, whatever it's going to be for some of these hash algorithms, then it's pretty obvious that there's just like from a pure information density point of view, you can't reproduce all of that 6 gigabytes from that. There's just information loss. So it's a tool for use for fingerprinting stuff. And the way that we use it with this Django hash ID field is kind of a way to give identifiers that don't necessarily map to numbers. And it's backed by this, ultimately by this hash ID library. Oh, which is curiously has been renamed. Hash IDs has been upgraded and rebranded. Huh. Well, this is news for me. Let's check this out. Squids is an open source library that lets you generate YouTube-looking IDs from numbers. These IDs are short, can be generated from a custom alphabet, and are guaranteed to be collision-free. That's interesting. How does that work? Opening the FAQ page here. Eventually. All right, let's read that page in a minute. Hopefully it'll open. All right, check this out. The main use of squids is purely visual. If you'd like to use IDs instead of numbers in your web app, squids could be a good choice for link shortening, event IDs, quick lookups, decoding back into numbers. They're not good for sensitive data because it's not an encryption library, and they can be decoded. So you'd reach for these IDs. So this is not purely like a hash, in that these IDs, and maybe that's why they changed the name because there's too much confusion. These IDs do happen to be reversible, but they give you something that looks like a hash, so it's not immediately obvious. And they're reversible because we're going to have a salt value. That doesn't make them a perfect security though. We'll talk about that in a minute. So there's a bunch of languages that can use these squid IDs. This is kind of fun. And here's an example of, there's a number and there's an alphabet, and it gives you these kind of short IDs. So by using this hash ID library, essentially what we'll be able to do is create our journal dot a hash ID like this, and put at email.journeyinbox.com. So that'll be nice, and it won't have this like numeric thing in it, which opens it up to a little bit more vulnerability in kind of user lookup. Like I could look up, oh, this is user 1, this is user 2, 3, 4, and so on. All right, let's read through a little bit. And yeah, this must be why they changed it. Generated IDs are not hashes and could be decoded. So this is like just a fancy encoding and decoding scheme. Almost like base 64, but for a nicer result. Okay. And it has this nice property that they're going to be unique. Cool. All right, so let's refer to this and talk about what we'd use this for. So what we can do is our account model, and any model we want to use, has an auto-generated ID field. And we want to essentially replace that field with this hash ID field. And by doing that, instead of getting the normal primary key, which is a incrementing number, then when you get an ID, it'll look like one of those short ID values that we can use. So I've used this. It's nice. I found this especially nice when creating pages for my homeschool app. So like I can give a school year, and somebody can't just go put a bunch of numbers in and just try and like loop through school years. I've also got other access controls that protect against that, but it adds some layer of protection that makes it not as easy to guess these things. So I really like this project. So let's first start by installing Django hash ID field. And let's go over here to our requirements file. And this will go right here, Django hash ID field. And the version was something I deleted by getting off PyPI. Okay. Django hash ID field 337 3.3.7. Okay, and then we've got the way we produce this file was running by running this command. I'll just yank that. Whoops. Nope. And over here, we can run the pip compile command. See what happens. So there were some changes to, we have to pull this hash IDs thing, and that's going to be the underlying implementation, the Python implementation, and then the Django hash ID field is what adapts it to work as a field, a model field here. And I'm noticing too that we've got two separate sets of changes that we should tease apart. So the first is about our receivers and the subject line, and then this next thing is about the requirements. So let's do add the journal. Okay, and we'll say, whoops. What file was that? Receivers. Can't use pprint. Okay. All right. And we'll say update subject line of prompt. Include the year. And this is for whatever number we've been working so diligently on. Issue number 5. Now we've got our hash ID field. So the change we want to make here is we want to replace our ID with the auto field that comes with hash ID. There's a couple things that we have to do to make that work well. The first thing we're going to do is go to our models, and by default, wrong area. This is our account models. We're going to modify our account model. When you have a Django model by default, it's going to give you an ID field, which, if we look in the settings file, is a big auto field. So it's auto incrementing ID field. And it's big because they made some changes that allow it to go outside of the normal limits of integers. Hey John, welcome. I'm working on setting the from field to be specific to each user that receives our email prompts. So we're adding this hash ID field, and we need to have our own ID field. And just like we saw in this school app, what we can do to do that is set our own ID field. And essentially it's going to shadow the initial field. And instead of using big auto field, it will replace it with hash ID auto field. So in fact, I'm going to steal this line because it's useful and put it over in our file. And so there's some stuff I want to change about this in a minute. We'll see. The thing we're going to need is the actual hash ID field. So I'll just, again, take this import, copy it, and we'll drop it in here, paste it in. We haven't installed this package yet, so let's go do the pip install. Does that, no, that we've got one with like load flags, right? No. C flags? Yeah. So that installed our hash ID field, and we can restart the LSP so it doesn't get mad at us about that not existing. And now we have our new hash ID field in use. So we want to stick to the fact that this is a primary key. It's not just any old field on this that we want to have a hash. We're replacing the existing ID. And we want to give each field its own salt. The idea behind a salt is if we didn't use a salt value, then all of our hashes would look the same. So we'd use some default value. And so if let's say you had a record with, I'm going to keep it very simplistic, even though this is not a true representation. Let's say you had a record with a primary key number value of 1, and assume that the hash ID value that it generated was X. If you had another model, model B, it also had a primary key value of 1. If you didn't do anything with the salt, the hash ID value of that would also be X. You'd have the same hash on those. But by producing and setting a different salt on here, then the effect is that each of them would have their own unique hash output. So it could be X and then Y, to keep the example simple. So we need to provide a salt, and the pattern that I did to do that was essentially use the model name, which was school year in the other one, but I'll just use account here. And we also need to have a hash ID field salt that is kind of a secret value. So we want to set that in our settings. And let's come down here and say this will go into right here, Django hash ID field. And we want the hash ID field salt. And we want this to have a value no matter what. So we'll put in we'll give it no default value, hash ID field salt. So before we can deploy again, we'll have to add this new value to our settings on Heroku. And since we're here and need to do this right now, we need to update this in another couple of places. So one is in our environment file example of, we'll put it right here, hash ID field salt, and we'll just call it some salt, doesn't really matter. I need to put this in the environment, the actual env file, and I don't remember if that had any secrets in it, so I'm going to put it on the secret screen for just a moment. Jump up to that env file and drop it in, and yeah, I think I have a dead API key in here that I shouldn't be sharing, but really, and maybe the webhook secret, so it's probably good that I wasn't showing that. So we'll bring back the actual view. So that's now in this file that we're not going to look at. And then in one more place we need to go is into the actual CI/CD setup and make sure that this will be there for all of our runs for CI. We'll change that to a colon, wrap it in quotes just to be consistent, and there we go. So we should be able to run the test suite. Whoops, missing settings. From Django conf import settings. And our jobs still run. Great. If we didn't have the setting value, it would have blown up and said, hey, we can't find this in the environment. So we're now in a place where we will get hash ID values. And the nice part about this is it doesn't change the existing column. Like I think that can still remain the same. What we should do is it is going to change the field type. So we're going to have a migration here. So let's change that by running make migrations. And it's going to modify the account type here. We'll go look at that migration. And number 4 here. So we've got, and you can see the actual attributes here that we're using the default. We're using a default alphabet, we're setting a length, it's going to be a primary key, so on and so on. And it's doing it both to the account and the historical account, which is part of our Django simple history dependency. But curiously, so how do you know if this affects the actual database table? And you could run that by doing manage SQL migrate. There's another command that will basically print out the database commands that will run for the database that you have configured. Now it's not going to be an accurate representation here because we're using SQLite as our development environment. So if I say accounts, and this is number 5, like this, you're going to see some stuff. And you'll be like, what's going on? But this is really a side effect of SQLite. SQLite will want to recreate these things. I think if we had the same thing for Postgres, I don't think it would have any effect on the actual table. There'd be a little bit of stuff, but nothing material, I believe. I could be wrong about that, though. Could be actually changing this. And I think it's okay in here in this context because we don't have heavy users. Like I am the user. So if it takes the database down for a second while working for traffic, like nobody but me is going to be impacted by that. So it's okay. In a future state, we might want to be more careful about our database migrations and do some more validation to make sure that they're safer. But I find that if you want to opt for having database migrations that have zero impact on your users, that's much harder. Esports Minixus, you're very kind. Appreciate that. Zero downtime migrations are a much harder pattern to follow because you usually will make sure it will make your migration process require a bunch more steps that will also vary on the database that you selected. You have to become knowledgeable about if I'm adding a column, am I adding it with a default value? That will matter for certain databases like Postgres and how it does indexing and all sorts of stuff. So this is something to be more careful of. As your app has more and more traffic, it becomes more of a matter of importance. On those early stages, though, especially if you're not a heavy traffic site or you have like acceptable downtimes windows for your users, these are things that you can deal with and make changes that might block the database and lock usage for a few seconds, and it's going to be fine. There is a good resource, I think, if you're looking for it, from edX Django database migrations. They probably find it. Yeah, it's one of these pages where they will walk you through a lot of considerations. Maybe it might be the same page. Yeah, the same page. If you want to learn about what's going to be safe or not in terms of migrations, this is a good place to start. They might have stuff that's specific to edX, but they also have stuff explaining why certain modifications will modify your database in ways that are undesirable for pure zero downtime migrations. Okay, but we don't have to worry about that too much. I think we're good at this point. So we have our changes here to the account. Let's review the change set and make sure that everything's good. We've got our hash ID field salt. We've set that on both these places. We have the new usage. We've replaced the ID field with our new hash ID auto field, and we've added it to our settings, and then we have it on our requirements. That's it. So let's commit and say switch account ID to a hash ID field. And again, this is all for number 5 here. Okay. So with that in place, I think we're ready to go for this next piece. And again, Django hash ID field is pretty cool. There's a bunch of options that I'm not covering here. You can go learn a lot more about it by poking at this. It's pretty cool. You can see how a hash ID's fields get used in a lot of different places. And really they smooth over all of these different, so you can do lookups and just treat it like any other ID field, and it works. In my experience, it works fine. I think there's a way to get the integer out of it if you want, if you really need to see like what's the primary key value. Or you could use the .pk attribute, which I think is like an alias to the primary key. Is that right? Well, let's go check. Maybe let's try migrating our local database, because I think we have some local data. So we migrated, and let's go to a shell plus, and let's get that first account. There's an account in the system that we were using in order to poke around with things. So A should be an account, and you can already see like it's QJNODP3 here. So if we do a.id, you get the hash ID. If we do a.pk, oh interesting, you also get the hash ID. I don't know if we do int of a.id, will that give us the ID? Hey, look at that. So it knows that we're trying to get like, what is it? Hey, come on now. What is it for real? So that's kind of the reversibility aspect of this. So that's sensibly, the account first is the first record in that database. Did we create any other accounts? I'm not sure that we did. Account objects last. No, we only have one account, so it doesn't matter. So I can't demonstrate to you that it's something else, but you get the idea. Okay. So let's return to the issue. Let's get out of here. Got Django hash ID field done. And we can jump over to our issue. So now it's time for us to change the reply to. Change the from on this, so that when somebody responds to us, they will respond to the one that we said is specific to an account. Where am I? Let's go to our jobs. And this has the added benefit of getting rid of the send grid reply to thing. I don't think that we will need that for anything else, and we'll be able to delete that setting. Maybe. Anything else use this? No, it's just our own usage. So I was trying to think of like, there is the sign up process from allauth, and I don't know what email address that's going to use. Hopefully it's some kind of default no reply email address that I set somewhere, but I don't know what it's going to be. Should poke on that later. So let's come up here and delete this. I like it when we can delete code. It's nice. So we're going to have something here eventually. That's the actual sending thing, but I'll just put it like this for now. And then on the other side, we'll say for the moment something else. Just to confirm, see our test, something is not equal to something else. Okay, let's set up the test side for the actual email address that we expect. And this is where we need to get the domain right, at least in the email subdomain. So that, I don't know if I want that to be a setting. This could be an area where we just hard code it. Yeah, that feels right to me. Like, I'm not planning to ever change the name of this service or change the DNS configuration that this is going to live on. So I think I'm okay in this context for doing a little bit more hard coding than might otherwise be, someone might be comfortable with. Which is to say that here, I'm going to want to do something like an F string with journal dot account, account dot ID at email dot journeyinbox.com. If I had my site be more configurable, like on different domain names or responding to different subdomains for email, then maybe I'd want to make this a constant. But I just don't care. Like it's like overkill abstraction. So sometimes pick the simpler thing is a better way to go. Now let's see how this looks. So here we've got our example. We've got the test is going to create an account, and actually you can see we know that for a fact that this is corresponds to 1 because we saw it earlier with the account ID of 1, and we're using the same salt value for our test suite. And every time this test runs, it's going to create. It will always be user record 1 for the factory function because the database for each test gets reset. So we know with confidence that this is journal.the hash of that account ID at email.journeyin.box.com. So now what we can do is set up the test side so that it's actually measuring what we want. So we are expecting, I'm expecting f journal.user.account.id at email.journeyin.box.com. And run the test. It runs. What are you complaining about? Okay, so this has more to do with the type annotation stuff. Can't figure out that the user factory is actually producing a user record that has an account attribute, so it's confused. I'm not going to bother fixing that right now. And we're not using the settings anymore, so we can get rid of that. So not a lot of change to get what we want out of this, but it's we made the change easy first by adding that hash ID field. Otherwise, we would have had more translation to do between to and from hashes, and it's just this is a good feature to have available to us for future models where we might want to use other hash IDs in the future. So that's a 4-line change. And let's see how we're doing on coverage. We're still going to have missing coverage for the receiver. No surprise there because we haven't really finished that chunk of code. Okay. Let's commit this change though. And let's say, whoops, not using the settings anymore over here. Oh. Actually, I don't want to do that. So I want to figure out, I keep the email Stack Overflow. Overflow mailbox. Oh, come on. I had a Stack Overflow that I'd searched for what this thing was called when you had the name of an email bound to it with an email address. Mailbox. I found out it was called a mailbox, so maybe we should just search for that. Email mailbox example. Oh, come on. They're going to talk about it generically, but not give me an example. What a loaded garbage. All right, you've seen it before, I'm sure of it, but the mailbox idea, the idea of a mailbox was having, what is it? Where you have something like, I'm just going to type it here, Matt Lehman. So that would be what you'd want to show up on the client as it's from me, and then you'd put the actual email address inside of these angle brackets. So you'd say Matt at somewhere.com. Okay. So this pattern here where you're including both the display name and the actual email address is called a mailbox address. I learned that. That's what I learned from Stack Overflow. So what I want to know is, if I added that here to our F string, will the Django send mail interface respect that? That's what I want to know. So let's see if we can get it to respect that. So let's go over, well, that's the test, wrong side. So we want to come over here to the from, and the from's going to vary for each person, right? So we'll have, is there much benefit from extracting this? Because if I do this, it's not going to be that much shorter. Okay. Let's do it this way. From email, the first part that we want, and I'm going to do it with parentheses because we're going to have lines that span multiple things here. So we will have, I'll use single quotes because I want to have double quotes for this, the name that I want to be sending. So we will do journey inbox journal. That's the thing that I want to show up in somebody's email address or actual email client. And I'll put a space there so that we have room for the next bit here. And then I'm going to take everything from here and paste it like that and do this and drop the comma so that this is not a hidden tuple. And then we'll say from email right here. Now, here, what we need to do, I think, is wrap this with those angle brackets. And this is I want to test this out, this sending, see if this is actually right and acceptable. I want to test it out both locally and with an actual deploy. So before we get too far into the parsing, because it's really important, because what I don't want to happen is, this is what I'm trying to avoid. If we don't include some of this mailbox style, then it's possible that somebody's email clients might show journal.blah blah blah as the thing that shows up in their who it's from, which would look pretty horrendous. So we save it like this and we run the test. We're going to get some failure because it no longer matches, right? Which is totally expected. So now I want to say, let's change this to a single quote because we want the double quotes. And then let's do journey inbox journal. End it like that. And yuck. Okay. Wraps in a weird way, but yeah, that's kind of unavoidable. And I have a feeling that my linter is going to complain at me that this line is too long. Gross. All right, fine. Let's make this a multi-line thing as well. And we will again split here and make that an F string. Okay. So now that should still be right, just over 2 lines. Okay. So I'm going to put on my secrets again to check on the setting of my env file and make sure that I am using the actual email backend for the console, which I am. Because what I'm going to do in a moment is run all of the app and fire off. Yeah. So let me get out of here. Sorry. Bring this back. I'm going to run the app and can run it with Heroku Local, which is running the web server. I thought we had more than that. Did we not put more than that in there? What's in the proc file? Okay, just the web server. So that's now chugging along. And if we come over here and we say, what was it? Run jobs daily. Oh, phooey. Source the environment. Interesting. Oh, this is the console side. The other one's not receiving anything. No surprise. So it is doing this in the way that I would hope. Now the question is SendGrid going to accept this format? I don't know why they wouldn't. I think it's part of the spec. So I think what I think our next thing to do is to try it out. So I think we've convinced ourselves that, at least from Django's perspective, they're like, okay, you want to send this? Maybe they don't do any validation on what you're sending. So they could be, there's a possibility that I'm getting this wrong, and that even though Django is accepting the data, that SendGrid might reject it. That's a possibility. But it's hard to know. So let's do two things. Let's, well, probably more than two. Use the mailbox format to include a nicer display name for number 5. And I haven't pushed the stuff up into the regular GitHub repo in a while, so I did that. I forgot to do that last time. Well, we're doing that now. And actually, there's one more thing. I just realized I forgot we have a pull request from pre-commit. Why are you not running? What? Oh, this is probably because we're not 100% coverage. Yeah, okay. This part is still broken because we've not written the test for the receiver yet. So I'm going to say, okay, I checked those. I'm happy with that. Let's merge this in. Random name, I'll get to your question in just a moment. It's a good one. Let me make a little farther here. I'm gonna get to you in, like, let's say 5 minutes after I've done this deploy and run this actual check. But I promise I will address your question. We're gonna pull this, and so now we're at the latest. I think we're ready to deploy this. So I can do make deploy, and it's probably gonna fail. Yep, because I haven't logged into Heroku. So I need to log in with Heroku, which just means I'm going to have to go through a bunch of screens that I'm sure has my email address in it. I think it even shows up on my terminal after I'm done, so you can bear with me. So what I'm going to do is talk you through it. I'm going to type Heroku login, and it is launching me to the web. I'm hitting the login button, and even my LastPass or 1Password stuff has expired, so I need to authenticate there to get my Heroku account. So many layers. The internet's so painful sometimes. Now I've got my 2-factor authentication. So punching that in now. And logging in, gave me a big green check mark. And it says I'm logged in. So I close that. I'm going back to my terminal. And of course, right there would be my email address for the world to see in bright green. So let me clear my terminal. And then I can hopefully bring y'all back now. Okay, so now I can run make deploy, but that's actually going to fail, actually, now that I think about it. So let's go to the Heroku dashboard. Heroku. Come on, I've got to have this in memory somewhere shortly. Dashboard, Heroku. We want to go to the settings because what are we missing? We're missing that new hash ID salt, right? And actually, there's probably one more thing to bring in here. Django hash ID field. Let's go back to the project on GitHub. And I want to look up what the expectation was, about something about the salt itself. I don't remember. Yeah, salt can be anything. Okay. So I need to generate a salt. Oh, sigh. Django. There's like a crypto method. Django crypto util. Come on. They might know it off the top of their head. There's a way to get like random character, and like the Django used it internally for its passwords and stuff. Django utils. Oh, what am I doing? I have a clone of Django over here. So let's get out of here. Crypto. Yeah, there it is. And get random string. So over here, we should be able to go shell plus. I don't think it brings in crypto though. From Django.utils import crypto. Now we can do crypto get random string. I don't know, 64. Cool. All right, I'm not going to use that one because y'all just saw it, but I'm going to put a secret on. I'm going to run that command again, and it's giving me a value. I'm going to take this value now. I'm going to go to the settings page for Journey Inbox. I'm going to reveal my config variables if you're on Heroku, and this is something you're doing later. And the name of the field was what? Hashid salt, right? Let me confirm. Settings, hash ID. Wow, I would have gotten it wrong. Hash ID field salt. Hash ID field salt. And then I'm going to paste in that big long value that I had earlier. John, I think they actually recommend, that is a good, I don't fault you for thinking that. That's a good way to go, but I think they recommend against using the secret key for reasons that have to do with some kind of security stuff of like, it's yeah, I don't remember what it was, but let me see. Did they mention the secret key? Yeah, they do. Okay. So let me clear my value over on the terminal so that we can't see this anymore. Okay, that's gone. I'll bring this back. And then let's take a look at the documentation. So they very specifically say, don't use the same thing as secret key. Maybe they don't say why. And I don't remember why. It's probably the idea of using the secret key. It's just not advisable because it compromises your security. There we go. You can optionally set a global salt. Do not use the same string as your secret key, as this could lead to your secret key being exposed to an attacker. I don't know how, but I guess it could. Yeah, I don't know what to say beyond what they've said there. I don't know how, because I feel like that's gonna be in the store in the same place, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe if you didn't put it in your settings, but where else would you put it? Because I feel like if they get access to your hash ID field salt. Oh, I get you now. Thanks, John. Then they probably also have access to your secret key, right? Like you're probably hosed either way. So we now have that new settings value set. So now when we deploy, because the challenge was going to be, it was going to run the release command as a pre-deploy step. And the first thing it was going to do is say like, hey, wait a minute, you're missing a setting and blow up in our face. So we don't want that. But now that it's set, I should be able to run make deploy. And it will put out our new version of the code that will have the prompt that will go include the right subject and include the account with the from that has the hash in it. So it's downloading it. Notice there's a change in packages. So normally it can cache that stuff if none of that stuff has changed, but we added Django hash ID field. So that's why it's having to do that work of building a new virtual environment to its bundle. And then it's running the release command. And this is the part that will actually have a migration, but it ran immediately because there's like no data. And there we go. All right, so now I should be able to go Heroku run bash to bring up an environment that has this. And then from there, we're going to do the run jobs daily command, which will issue that. And with any luck, nothing will blow up in our face. But, you know, if something does, we'll have learned that SendGrid can't handle mailboxes in that way. All right, cool. So SendGrid is still receiving that entry metadata, which we can leave and maybe we'll store in the future, but we're not going to worry about that for now. And I should be able to see, hey, there it is. That's awesome. So again, you all aren't going to be able to see this, but it does say right there next to the ID, it does say Journey Inbox Journal. Rather, previously it just said journal lowercase because that was the left side of the @ sign. And then when I expand it, it has journal dot a hash ID, which I can only presume is my own hash ID. And it's got the year. So I think everything about this is now set up the way that we want and need. So that's great progress. Okay, so let's get out of Heroku. We're all good there. And I feel like we're cruising. Or certainly making the progress that I was hoping to. So we're done with this second item. All right. So then I had this other element here. It says plan to store the prompt and send the date metadata anyway. All right. Yeah, this will be useful. So I don't know that I want to set up idempotency yet. But if we take a step where every time, well, maybe we will figure out idempotency as part of this. That actually could be good. Well, I'll talk through what this means in a second. So I want to think for just a moment. Yeah, I think that's going to be useful. So let's chat about what I want to do. And we might be outgrowing the job. No, not yet. I think we can still live with the job as it is. Okay. We can see, first of all, let's delete this. We don't need that metadata thing. That was just a sample thing to show that it showed up in SendGrid, and we saw that previously. So there's nothing there. We need a couple things. We want to protect ourselves from sending for the same date multiple times. And this could be, there's a bunch of reasons that this could happen. Like, let's say, let's think of an example. Let's say I have multiple users, and right now this job is kind of dumb. It's just executing everybody at the same time. Well, that sounds bad. It's executing and delivering a prompt for everybody at the same time. Oh, I'm sorry. Random name, I hope you're still there. I forgot about your question. Let me get back to you. You asked, would I recommend Django over something like Laravel? And I think my answer would be, what language do you know? Laravel is a super popular language. Or not language, framework. And for those that don't know, Laravel, I would say Laravel is to PHP as Django is to Python. As Ruby on Rails is to Ruby. They all have the same vibe to them. And that vibe is we're going to bake a bunch of stuff into a single project for you. And, you get the benefit of having an opinionated take on how to build web applications. And really, what's differentiating is kind of what you prefer to program in. I think Laravel also has some really good, powerful ecosystem stuff. There's a really strong community. And part of that is that the PHP community is just gigantic. Like the web PHP community, born out of WordPress, is huge, right? Like, what is it, 25% or some absurd number of all of the internet runs on WordPress, which is just like mind-boggling if you think about it. And then you get Facebook runs on PHP. Like PHP is here and here to stay. At the same time, PHP is not everybody's favorite language. It has a bunch of warts. I don't know. I don't know how to be charitable to PHP there. I've tried it, and I've tried different frameworks, and my experience with PHP is just like, ugh, I don't really care for this. But I think you can be equally successful in either Laravel or PHP, or extend it to Ruby on Rails. Like there's that space too, if Ruby is more your style. So I don't know if I would recommend one over the other strongly. If you would say you're most familiar with Python, I think that Django is a fantastic tool for that. I think it gives you a lot of the stuff that you would need for building an app, almost all of it. It has a good, rich community and ecosystem, so I think it's pretty valuable that way. But maybe the best way that you could figure that out, or figure out your preference, is to try a little test project. Like code up a to-do app in Laravel and do the same experience with Django and see how you feel about it. See, like maybe you end up liking the Django ORM. Maybe you end up liking Laravel, what do they call, blade templates? Like there's a bunch of different layers and tools, and they each have their own feel to them and their own patterns. And one of them might feel like a better fit to you than the other. So that's my recommendation for you. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer to say like, well, do whatever works for you, but that's the best I got for you. I think you certainly won't go wrong with picking Django if you decide you just want to pick one. Oh, no problem. Happy to answer your question. Okay, getting back to this, what was I trying to say? I was trying to say we want to protect ourselves from the situation where we send out a prompt multiple times. So in this case, like I now have a prompt in my email for Thursday, November 2nd, because that's because this is all configured to run on UTC. And I wouldn't want to accidentally send that same email to myself multiple times. But if we imagine a future where we have multiple accounts in this loop, and maybe for some reason I'm the first account in the system, so it sends me an email, and maybe it sends the second person an email. But on the third person, the whole process blows up for some reason, and it has something to do with the account. And I figure like, oh shoot, like I need prompts to go out, so I need to fix this. At that point, I could apply the fix, but what I don't want to have happen is if I run it again, I don't want to send another prompt for the same date to both me and that second person. I want it to just be from the third person onward, right? So that idea of having something that runs safely and produces the same output no matter how many times you run it is called idempotency. We want this execute job to be idempotent, and that's a weird word, and people have different ways of pronouncing it. It looks like this. I'm going to put it in all caps: idempotent. And I always forget, like, is that I think there are multiple pronunciations, I believe. I don't think one is right or wrong, or maybe they are, and people just get it. People just assume that either will work. So idempotent. hear this? Idempotent. That's what they're saying in my ear. So anyway, if we do that, we add this layer of safety into our setting process. Yeah, there's also this. Yeah, you're right, John. Like, there's another way. There are layers that we're going to add in the future to help segment this out. So at some point in the future, as a future feature, I think we put it in our list. Let's go take a look. I wanted to have some kind of ability to set your own time zone. Yeah, make a user preference to pick the time zone. So if somebody wants to receive their email localized to their time, and I want to receive it 9 a.m. for wherever if I'm on the West Coast, I want to send it get it at 9 a.m., then I could do that. We're not going to do that right now, but that is a future thing. And that would save us some of this conflict of these things stomping on each other. But still, it'd be nice to have a record to say, like, oops, I'm not accidentally sending it to you more than you asked for. The last thing I want to do is spam you with multiple prompts, because that would just be annoying. So we're going to make this idempotent by essentially recording the fact that we sent it. And at the end of the recording, if we save that thing, then and include a check at the beginning of the loop that allows us to skip it. So you can imagine, I'm thinking the model name is going to be something like prompt. So we'll do prompt, and then we'll create it up here. And then on the other side, we will do if prompt, I'm not using the right ORM methods here, but roughly, if prompt exists for account, then continue, right? So we want it to go to the next one. We don't want to send that email. So that's the idea that will make this this whole activity idempotent for each account in there and make it safe. All right, so let's talk about what if we're going to include a new model. Let's build that. The Code Alchemist, you're working on something too, like something similar to making idempotency. I'm curious what you mean there. So to capture making this unique, what do we need? We need to know the date that we're sending for, and we need to know the user. I think that's it. It would be beneficial if we also from like an audit, so that the date and the user is sufficient for having the existence check, because that's what we're going to get on line 17. Here is the date, and then we're going to go over the accounts, or I suppose the accounts that we actually care about, and then we can attach additional information, but that's more for like our own tracking purposes. So we can include, for instance, the message ID. So if we ever had needed to see, like, if for some reason somebody tried to make some claim of like, hey man, you never sent me this prompt, your service sucks, I would like to be able to like look up in SendGrid, given a prompt in the database, I could see like Angry John, not you, John, sorry, bad name choice, Angry Billy Bob, on November the 2nd didn't receive, or claims he didn't receive his email, and then I could go into my own Django admin table, find that prompt record, find the message ID that we will record from the call to SendGrid. I could go to SendGrid and take a picture, or like bring up the log, bring up the specific message, and bring up the whole activity log of, hey, here's how it was sent. And I could prove to that customers, to the best of my ability, of we really tried. Like, please check your spam, or it looks like it went through. Just be kind to someone who's like that. So that's something that we could do by storing that message ID. The Code Alchemist, I don't think that we're going to get to the time zone diff stuff, but we will definitely get to that in a future session. But I will, if you're like needing it today, I'll give you a pointer towards the tool that I use. That assumes that I remember it, and I don't. Which is funny because I'm actually the maintainer, one of the maintainers for it. There it is, Django TZ detect. I picked up maintainership for this project because it hadn't had an update in a long time for the version of Django, and I decided to step in and help out the person. My name is, I'm one of the committers on this project. So Django TZ detect is really cool in that you can add this, and this will help with like your forms of, if you want to display a form, you can localize the date time to their time, and it does this through a little clever bit of JavaScript snippet that it can, when a page will load up, it can use the date object created via the JavaScript API and parse that and find out your time zone, and then it will send back to Django, this is your time zone, and store that in the Django session so that when you're processing date on the other side, that date that's sent in the post response can be localized, so you can translate to, maybe you're on the West Coast or maybe you're in India. I don't know where you are, and it doesn't matter because that translation will happen to be localized. And so even though you might say, I wanted it for 9 p.m. on the West Coast versus my 9 p.m. on the East Coast, that'll be appropriately fixed to UTC. So it's really, really awesome tool in that way. Highly, highly recommend it. And it's so easy. It was so easy to set this up. That's part of why I contributed to making it continue to work, because I found it to be so cool, so powerful. Okay, not going to get deeper than that though. So hopefully that was enough for you to go on. Let's do the prompt modeling and then see if we can get that into our job here. And that might be as far as we get this evening. I don't think we're going to get into any parsing, but still some progress. What do I want? So I said I wanted 3 things, right? I want a foreign key to the account. I want the date. I want a date field, and I want a text field that can store this message ID, which is a string. So this is the entries app. That's as good a place as any. I don't think we need a separate models file for this. So we're going to come in to the models file, and we'll create our new model. And we'll call it prompt. And we'll say it's a record to track that a daily, well, it might not be daily, that a journal prompt was sent to a user. That's really what this is about. All right, so so we need 3 things. Let's do, actually, you know what? Why not recycle when? That's a good name for the field. When was the prompt sent? That's cool, and that's useful. The other thing that we want, I did a foreign key to the user. How do I feel about that? I'm wondering if I want the symmetry there or if I want it on the account. Because, I don't know, they're kind of equivalent. It doesn't really matter. The user might not have actually been the best choice. I think well, maybe not. So here, the user is convenient because the user, if we have a web interface, we can do the lookups for all the entries from the user, which will be attached to the HTTP request. That's what makes that a convenient lookup there. It's actually, to go to the account is one more layer of indirection. We bring up the job again, I think we do the selected user anyway. So we could be consistent here by using the user record, which feels decent. I don't want to think too hard about it. You know, there's always a chance that you can regret some design decision, and maybe this is a regrettable one, but I'm going to continue to use it. So let's add a user. We're going to connect the prompt to the user instead of to an account. Yeah. And we're going to give this the related name of prompts. Sure. So if we ever wanted to look up what are all the prompts related to this user, how many times did we send it to somebody, we could do that. And so that'll be how to access that. You'll have user.prompts.all. That's the related manager name. That's why this is called related name. If it wasn't this, it would be prompt set is the default. But prompts has a nicer ring to it, I think. And then we need one more thing. So this prompt is not going to store the body. Instead, it's going to store the message ID that we get back from SendGrid. And again, we had the, hold on. So we have this message ID. It's actually generated, so internally this is actually an email generated thing, but I don't think I care. John, let me consider your question for a minute. Just maybe a date time. I'm trying to think of, I think no matter what, so I don't think so. And here's the reason why. Because from the journal, I'm not going to have any more granularity than the date. So if I sent it to you at, let's say you got a prompt at, like you had your, we're in a future where we have configurable time zones and when something gets sent. Okay, that's the context. Let's say you got a prompt at 9 a.m. and you're like, you know what? I'm just not getting to these in the morning. I want to switch it to the evening. Okay, and you do it, and you make that choice at 11 in the morning your time. So you log on to the site and you change it to 9 p.m. In that case, when 9 p.m. rolls around, I don't want to send you a second prompt for the day. It's still November the 2nd when you made that decision. So it's not really, I don't think it's right to send it. So in that view, having the specificity of a date time is, in my mind, like overkill. Because I think we want to avoid the multiple prompts per day, because our granularity is never going to be lower than an entry for the day. Hopefully, that's my rationale. Maybe I'm missing something. If you think I am, let me know. But that's what I'm thinking there. And then finally, we want to say we want a message ID, and we want that to be equal to, I'm just going to use a text field because it's easy, like that. And that could be, if we got nothing, that could be an empty string. And there's probably some variance here in so there's two kinds of fields that are related to characters in Django models. There's the char field, C-H-A-R field, some car field, it depends on how people pronounce it, or char field, like I've heard it a bunch of different ways. So you've got your character field and you've got your text field. And the character field has, you can kind of set some validation constraints of how long you want, what's the maximum length you want that to be. And for the most part, I think it's just enforced at the form level of like, I don't want it to be any longer than 128 characters, and it will reject a form there. Sometimes that, I believe, depending on the database engine, I think that gets carried through to constraints that might be applied. Like, don't quote me on this, but I want to say that MySQL actually cares about that length constraint, and I know for a fact that Postgres doesn't. internally, Postgres is going to store this as the same as a text field. So text field is kind of like an unbounded length. So you don't have to specify the max length attribute on this particular field. Because I use Postgres, I tend to just say text field because who cares? But there are times where it also affects like the form rendering. So if you use a text field, you're likely going to get, not likely, the default is a, what is it? The form box, the bigger box that you see, whereas a character field is going to be those one-liner input fields. Those are the primary differences here. But this is going to be something that nobody's going to input this as a record. This is purely internal for our purposes of making sure that the process is idempotent, but so we can use whatever field type we want. So I think these are the three that we really need to utilize. And yeah, I think that's where we can stop with that. So let's carry on and figure out what we're going to create. Let's get rid of that comma. Let it go to a one-liner here. And we don't need to print that. And we don't need to print that. We're going to use this message ID in a moment. Okay. Just thinking through what I want to create here. I don't know that I directly want to use the ORM's create method. I've kind of adopted the philosophy of making the interface that you want for your models. And that, like you can see, we did that in this example on this line right here. When we wanted a random entry, we didn't just use some like filter operations on the ORM. Instead, we encapsulated this into a method on the actual entry, in this case, the manager, in order to do that. And I think I want to do the same thing for the prompt. And like by giving us an interface that it gives us it gives us the confidence that the details that are going to be hidden in here are really they might change, and we have control of that because we know that the user is only ever coming in through the interface method that we've defined. That may have limit of lesser utility here in this create because it's probably just going to be a proxy for the create method. But I think that's okay in this context. So let's say that we're going to use, let's close this for a minute to just give ourselves more space. We're going to create a prompt manager. Going to follow the same pattern as the entry manager. Prompt manager. Whoops. So now we have a space that we can use, and we want our create method here. So more I'm doing this, I'm like, is this right for this one? Create might be a case where it's like, it is okay to just use the ORM. Like there's really, what is the operation that we're trying to capture? We're going to save 3 separate attributes on here. So we might have to use keyword arguments instead. All right, I've convinced myself that there's a time and a place for those custom methods, but maybe create is not it, or at least for this simple case. If we were deriving some data inside of creation, sure, but I think it's going to be overkill for what we're doing. So let's go to the send mail job. Let's come to the bottom, and we want to do prompt.objects.create. And we need all of our attributes here, right? Every single one of them is required. So we'll say the user is equal to the account user. When is equal to today. And message ID is equal to, where'd it go? Message dot anymail status dot message ID. And I think that should be enough to get rid of this now. So we don't have the prompt class imported. We can do that. Prompt. And I think our test should still work. Nope. Womp womp. Oh. Maybe message ID came back as null. And this is not allowing, null is not allowed here. Okay, let's print the message and email status just to confirm that that's in fact the case. Yeah. So it came back as a none. How do we fake it? Oh man, that's annoying. Shoot. How do we get it to give us an ID? Boo. The other thing we could do is make our prompt stupid and make it allow null, but I don't feel good about that. I think that is an us problem. We're not really testing it right. And my recommendation generally is if you can leave your constraints tight, which is to say don't allow null as much as possible, then you are going to have a better time, because it gives you higher trust in your data. If we made this nullable, then suddenly every time we want to use the message ID, well, there's the possibility that it could be none, which is a real nuisance. Okay, so let's see, how do we get, let's go back to our project and back into the virtual environment. We're going to go back into anymail. Nope, come on. Okay, we're back in anymail and we want to search for message ID. When does it get sent or set? We also have the reality that we are using the console here. So these backends, which might be the things that set these message IDs, are not getting run at this point. So it may be that if we wanted to test this properly and not have this be null, that we might have to mock some stuff, which I'm not crazy about, but that may be what we have to do. Because here's the send grid where it sets message ID, and you can see it sets it right here, 132. So let's do that. Let's take a look there. Backends send grid, go to 132, and set anymail ID is called when serialized data is called, which comes from the parent class, but I'm sure that only happens when the actual backend is getting used. Right now it's going through the console backend and never calling this method on the backend. That's so confusing. There's multiple layers of backends here. There's the Django mail system backend, and then there are backends for each ESP within anymail. So when the mail backend is running tests, it's using the console, and it's not using the Django anymail backend. And because it's not using the Django AnyMail backend, all of the email service provider backends that upper mail backend calls is never happening. So this code path is never getting executed during test, which is good. We don't want to send to the SendGrid API. But it just means that we never get the identifier, which unfortunately leaves us with the option of us having to mock out this message send method and setting our own. Oh gosh, what are we gonna do there? Ugh, gross. I was gonna say we could mock out send, but it's not something that send returns. It's actually, so this is where it gets even nastier, and I think this is I don't know, kind of feels like a design flaw in AnyMail, but they can be the judge of that. Where when you call send, it is setting this AnyMail status as a side effect of calling send. So this attribute just doesn't exist properly until after send happens. That's what it says in the documentation, which is just kind of gross. So what we could do is we could mock this entire message class, and then this message itself would be a mock, and then this becomes a mock and a mock and a mock and a mock. At that point, like, what are you actually testing? And it gets worse because the sending does still matter, because it's going to test against the console outbox. So if we don't call the real send method, then it's not going to show up in the mail outbox from the test, the in-memory mail backend. Yikes. Yikes. So, how do we fix this? Is there a way that we can hook into the mail backend and do something based off of its operation, like a signal? Ooh, that'd be even more disgusting. But, you know, sometimes you do things that you're not super thrilled with. All right, let's go take a look, see how nasty it's going to be. I don't want to upgrade Oh My ZSH right now. Let's just look at the Django that's available in this virtual environment. It should be sufficient. And we want to go to mail. Nope, nope, nope. It's okay. That's not going to be sufficient because it doesn't have the right scope. Sometimes things that I want to be easy are just not. Christopher, appreciate the question. How do I use the terminal in Vim? I don't. I actually don't really care for the terminal in Vim, so I'm not. Maybe what do you? I'm not sure what you're seeing. So there's some stuff that I do run that it appears that I'm using the terminal, like when I run my tests. But that is more of me having an integrated test runner that will shell out to the terminal and then display the results back here. But as far as like having a ZSH shell, what I'm actually doing, and it may not be really visible, is I've got multiple tabs up here, and I'm using keyboard shortcuts to jump between the tabs. So that's my strategy. Some people like to use tmux and integrate tmux into their Vim setup. I've tried it. I just didn't really like it because what I found with that tmux setup is there's a certain escape sequence for tmux that you have to get familiar with, and I just never gelled with me. Just wasn't a good fit for me. Okay, so mail, where's the back end? Spend more than 8 hours working around test. Oh man, Bello, that's no good, man. All right, I think it's the local memory backend, I believe, is the one that we're using for testing. Let's look at our test settings to confirm. Yeah, we're using the local memory email backend. And so what we're doing now is, what I'm doing at this moment is there a way to influence the message So it's when it's calling send, the send operation, it ultimately gets into this send messages method. And it does the append onto the outbox, which is what we're checking against. Oh, you're welcome, Christopher. Sugar. How do we influence that thing? Good grief. Because if I mock it, then what am I really getting? I don't get the thing going through an email system. I don't get the validation. I feel like I lose out on some amount of the code checking or the code execution that I do appreciate out of this test. I'm firmly in the camp of integration tests, bring them on. If they're fast enough, then I don't care. Like, my test suite, it's running quick enough. It takes a second. That's as faster than I can think. So that's okay. Some people get super purist about like, no, you got to separate everything. It's like, screw that. I really want to be getting more confidence. That's what my test suite is for. I don't really like mocking out a bunch of stuff because it seems excessive. I'm also wondering should I care? Like, should I validate my assumption here of or maybe another kind of cop-out strategy yuck, but that would get past this, right? Yeah, all right. Okay, I don't feel good about this, y'all, but I'm doing it. So what is this? It's essentially the same as none, but I'm really confident that in the real operation of this system, we're going to have real message IDs coming from, and so the consequence of, aggressive mocking is bottom, and I'm guilty of some really aggressive mocking in the past. I've done some like disgusting stuff in my days that I'm not proud of looking back. It's like, ugh. Okay, so this is saying that if it happens to be none, well then do an OR operation and make it an empty string. And an empty string is not none, and the text field doesn't blow up on that. It's just going to leave a prompt with no message ID in the field. What I'm going to do is leave it like this, but I'm going to put a comment of why. Why did I do this? Because future me will be like, what were you doing? So we'll say the message ID is not nullable, but during the tests, the in-memory in-memory backend does not set a value except empty string to avoid nasty mocking acts. All right, if I feel okay about this, and that's ultimately what matters, right? Like, I have to feel good about my tests and the code that I'm writing. Okay, so we have a prompt that gets created into this. It's not going to have a message ID. That's fine. What we do want to assert is at the bottom here that there is now a prompt in existence. So we want to assert that prompt objects filter user equal user. We'll say the count is equal to 1 because we should have confidence of that. And so we need to bring in that model in order to get that. So we'll say from journal entries models import prompt. Okay. We run the test. Hey, it passes. Okay. So now we're not done though. We're getting close to done. I'm a little over time from where I expected to be, but it's okay. We need the other side. we need the test to ensure that what is the other test that we need? So how do we enforce the idempotency? The idempotency can be enforced by essentially in a similar test setup, we will add a prompt that matches for today. Or I guess it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it does. We're going to need to add a prompt that matches for today. And on the other side, we should see our outbox length is 0 and that our prompt count remains 1. We don't want a new prompt, right? So those are important things to have, which we will get by exiting the loop early. So let's write that test and see how it goes. So I'm going to copy this whole test, in fact. It's a good starting point. We've got our little time machine set up. Fine. Keep our time fixed. Feels good. And then we want to modify our test string and the test name. So, so this will be idempotent. Okay, and a user will not receive a prompt twice. I like to have you could almost take my documentation strings from my tests and view them as like a textual description of the requirements of my system, what I expect to be true. But you don't need any language of like, should do this, or test that, or expect. Like you can just state it as a fact, and I think it reads nice and succinctly. There's even a good blog post about test doc strings that I really liked. And who was it? What was his name? It was Jonathan something. He worked for Canonical. See if I can find it just based on that. Test doc string naming Jonathan. Oh, junk. I'm not going to remember his name. He had some handle that he didn't use on his actual website. One more filter on here. Canonical. Canonical, the company that makes Ubuntu. Sorry, y'all. This was a really solid post too. It was like just short, sweet, simple information about how to write good test doc strings. I can't find it. Is that get signs? I think it is get signs. Check really quickly. Let's do a vertical split on my editor config. My vimrc, I mean. Whoops, not vertical split. Come on, man. My vimrc. And get. Maybe not. Yeah, it's get signs. Yep. Get info in buffer, in the gutter. There it is. Okay. So we want to test that in the end, the length of our outbox is 0 when we execute. We want to delete all of this stuff, and we want to assert that there's only one prompt. So that's all. I think both of these things will fail because there's no guard right now. So if we make, we're going to need a prompt factory. All right. The layers just keep growing. So now we've got an entry factory. This is to make the prompts quickly. Yep. It's going to be mostly the same as this. We'll just reuse it and change this to prompt factory. Factories make it nice and quick to make factory data. And we have the same, it's hooked up to date time today, which should be resolved to the same local date. That should be okay. It's got the same user factory. It doesn't have a body attribute. And we need an actual message ID if we make a prompt. So, oh shoot, what is it? Lazy. Lazy, right? Or is it sequence? Sequence. Okay. So our message ID is going to look like factory sequence takes a lambda of, that doesn't really matter, n, and it's going to return a formatted string of message ID, and then this is the n is just like a number that it gets assigned when that lambda is called. We'll do n like this. It's just guaranteeing that each message ID for that sequence will be unique. Yeah, every prompt will have message ID 1, message ID 2, and so on. Right? Yeah. Just a way to ensure uniqueness there. But for each test, I should say. Okay, so now that we have a prompt factory, we can go to the entry factory area. We can add the prompt factory. And here we can say we don't actually care about the entry itself, but we can put in the prompt factory. We can put in the user is equal to the user, same thing. And I think we can get away with this. Because I think because it'll use the today, and this will use local date. Oh, is that going to fight? Oh, geez. Because this might be time zone aware. Like this could actually fail. Screw it. I'll just get the time zone utility. It's fine. From Django utils import time zone. This will just guarantee that the prompt that gets generated here is going to be the same, or have the same prompt filter that we need. So when we say when, we'll say time zone dot local date. All right. Now run that test. It should blow up because the outbox is, we didn't actually stop anything, so it's actually still making the email. Pays no attention, and I bet if we actually switch the order here, the prompt will fail. It'll be 2 of these, unsurprisingly. All right, so let's keep the sequence in order. Not that it matters, but that's just what I'm choosing to do. And then we need to insert our check here. So here I want, we need the 2 pieces of data, right? So what we want to have is prompt. Again, I want to use a method that's like a query pattern here that is unique for this. I don't want to actually just do the filter and do an existence check. So we'll say, what should we call this? If prompt, goodness, exists for, does that feel good? I don't know about that. Account user and today. Then continue. So that's the guard clause that will prevent any of this other stuff from running, wasting the time of this job. The exist for that thing doesn't exist at all. We gotta go make that. If we run the tests, let's save this. And if we run the test, it's going to say, what are you talking about? There's no such thing. So now it's time to take our manager that we didn't do earlier and redo that and create a prompt manager. Let's do substitute entry for prompt. and we want to say exists for self, because the objects that's attached to the class, the prompt model, is an instance of a manager. So it is an actual method, not just a bunch of class methods. And we want the user, and we want when. Check if a prompt exists for this user on this date. All right, so to do that, we can get a query set, like an empty, start with an empty query set by calling self get query set. And then we want to do filter. Actually, this could probably just be a one-liner. Again, like, it may not always seem valuable to make these methods, but sometimes you come back in and you find like, oh, I need to actually change and extend this method. And by having this method definition here, it gives you the place to do that. Whereas if you didn't, if you just wrote an existence check in a bunch of different places, then you might find yourself updating all of them. So there's some upfront cost here, but it has some longer term benefit. So we want to say user is equal to user and when is equal to when. And instead I'm gonna make this a one-liner. So exists and then just return this. So that's a pretty simple method. And at that point, our test should pass. Nope. Come on. Oh, I know what happened. I didn't actually attach this new manager to the actual class, to the model yet. Still using the default one. So we have to say objects equals prompt manager. Now we've connected the manager appropriately. And if we run this, hey, it passes. Because we have the right prompt. So where does that leave us? We have an idempotent process for sending emails. Cool. So if I deployed this right now, then we would not, I should not see another email to my account. In fact, we could, how would we actually know this? We wouldn't. So let's put a little bit of logging in here that could be a useful diagnostic tool for us in the future. Like most of the time I don't care about this stuff. So we'll say we can say, I don't want to put like sensitive data into the logs. So let's do an F string. Prompt already exists for account user ID. Again, this is going to be a hash ID. Or no, it's not. That's on the account. We'll do account ID on today. Okay. And then we could also, at the end of our little loop here, just put some kind of confirmation of print prompt prompt sent for account ID. With Heroku's logs aren't, I don't even know what their retention is. It's not very long. So like this is data that will be lost very quickly, but it could be just as a coming through here, we could see, oh, this has already happened, and that might be a good signal. In fact, I kind of want to see it, although I might not be able to show you the output because might include sensitive email information, but we'll do our best. So let's see how this all shaped up. Shaped up. So we've got our new prompt thing. We've got the check for the existence. We've cleaned up the metadata stuff that we're going to be sending to SendGrid. So we're still going to send the date to SendGrid. So we'll have like kind of double verification. Actually almost triple. The ID, this message ID, that gets sent to SendGrid because SendGrid doesn't actually create IDs on its own. That's something you can read about in the details of this particular ESP integration. SendGrid doesn't create these IDs for some reason. So the workaround is Django Anymail is creating an ID, a random UUID 4, and then sending that as metadata to SendGrid. So we're going to send that bit of metadata. It gets merged into this metadata dictionary. So we're also going to send the entry date as a string representation here. So those two pieces of information are going up to SendGrid and can give us that traceability back. And then we're going to store that as well in our prompt. And we've got all these other attributes here. We could go and make an admin for this. I don't want to. I just, maybe someday it'll be useful. I don't think I need it today. It's kind of one of these scenarios where if I do need to check that auditing thing, I can write the admin for this in 5 minutes from what I know. So we've got this logging that'll appear here. And let's take a look. We've got the prompt manager and the prompt model, which has these fields on it. And the prompt factory. And we've updated our test to check that a prompt is created and to check that a prompt is not created when it's already been sent. The other bit that we're missing, and Code Alchemist, I see your question there or your comment, I'll get to it in 1 second, is this is a new model, so we need a new migration. So we'll do run make migrations. Creates a prompt migration. So here we go. And we need to format this for black. I thought that Django had some change here that would automatically have this be formatted as black. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Hold on. I'm now curious. Is there a help option? Is this an option I need to specify? Did anybody see it? I could have sworn that this was like if it had it, it would do it. Because otherwise you get this, you get pre-commit complaining, like this thing's not formatted correctly. And I thought that Adam Johnson, being the awesome person that he is, fixed that. Maybe I need to go ask Adam. All right, let me look at your question or comment here. How would I handle compliance stuff? That is a good question. I guess compliance to whom? I am doing my best, but maybe you mean like GDPR, and the honest answer is I don't know. If you're asking at the GDPR, so that's the European Union, for those that might be in other regions of the world, the General Data Privacy, GDP, General Data Privacy regulations. I don't remember what it stands for. It's basically a bunch of privacy stuff that if you're serving your website in the European Union countries, that you're supposed to comply with about how people's rights about what they can do with data. And for the time being, not having like any customers right now, I'm just viewing it as best effort to be security conscious. Like you can see, like for instance, I was very careful not to log email addresses in this log. I was logging the IDs. Like I really don't want to have to go back and like scrub log records somehow. You know, maybe there's some future where I want to save logs. I don't know why I would ever do that, but maybe that exists. And I don't want to have that possibility that there's something I have to go clean up and scrub. GDPR has a bunch of stuff like that. It's just like you've got to really give the user the opportunity to fully expunge their data from your system. And the easiest way to do that is just by not having their data everywhere. If I was just in the database, then I could just say delete, and it's not a problem. So I think that's how I view compliance security stuff for now. there are other, and as far as other security tools, there's some tools that we could reach for to do some basic security checking. And we've already done some of that with the Django configuration, that kind of thing. So yeah, user privacy. Yeah, so I'm doing my best, but my best is about all I can offer at this point. And if it becomes a bigger problem in the future, I will deal with it then. But having a reserved policy about what data I'm storing and where is, I think, the way that I'm addressing this. Hopefully that answers your question. So let's try and run some coverage. We're still going to have missing coverage there because we haven't tested the receiver. But I think I think after this evening, I think we're finally done with the sending side. That we have enough of the bells and whistles to track that prompts are being sent out and all of that sort of stuff. I feel good about it. So let's add all this stuff. Check the stage content one more time just to make sure I feel good about it. Got rid of the prints that we didn't want and kept the prints that we did. There's the migration. There's the new model. There's the factory for the model. There's the tests. Great, great, great. Okay. And because I merged the pre-commit tools, we've got some new stuff there. Okay. Add the prompt model track sending. Okay. Let's push that up so I don't forget and somebody gets on my case like last time. And I also want to go ahead and deploy this. And the reason I want to deploy is I want to try and run this again. If I do run jobs daily again, then I shouldn't get another email prompt. I already sent one like an hour and a half ago. And I should be able to see in the logs, there's already a prompt created for this user. So that would be a good final validation to give us confidence that this is working the way it's supposed to. Cool. All right, so let's do Heroku run bash. And, oh, you know what? This might even show up right here because it's going to be a management command output. Run jobs. So do I need to hide that? Is like, are those IDs? Because we said those hash IDs could be. This is my real ID here. I might need to hide this. And I'll explain why in a minute, or I'll explain why as I'm running this. But I'm going to put on the secret screen and run this. Yeah. Oh, it said prompt sent. Oh. You know why? Because although my previous one, right, I got to clear that out, but I'll explain more. So although that previous prompt was from today, we didn't have the prompt table in place yet. So there was no prompt record yet. So it didn't actually do the thing I wanted to. So, but a third time should do the thing that I wanted to do. And in fact, I've got a second entry here. You know, same content. Okay, but now I should be able to run it again. But here's the problem. The reason I can't show you this is my hash ID for this thing is tied to the sending address. So in theory, you could junk up my journal by sending to my email address. So I got to keep that kind of private as like a data element here. And in fact, that might even change what I want to record about users, because it'd be one thing to, if this is sort of a secret thing, if I recorded, say, the user ID, then I could go look up a prompt, and that actually, you know, that's actually feeling better. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that right here. We're going to do user ID. And if I make that admin page in the future, then the user ID is the thing I really want to look up anyway. So I'm still going to run this to confirm, in fact, that that this will run idempotently. It'll give the second message that says, it didn't create something for this person, for this account ID, and then we'll make that logging change really quickly. So let me run this one more time. Let's see it run quickly, and it says sending prompts to active accounts. Prompt already exists for, and then the hash ID that I should not be sharing on 2023-1102. So that's exactly what I want. Modulo the one change to the ID. So let me bring this back. So now we've got this, and that truly is a sentence. So I'm going to put a period on there. Same down here. Prompt sent for that. Oh, and I guess I should also say user ID. Okay. So this will be better. This is kind of like more of an internal facing ID anyway, so that feels good. So let's say log the user ID instead of the account ID to avoid leaking secrets. I'm going to use in quotes. Not a secret, but whatever. And this is for number 5. All right. Cool. Where does that leave us? I think we're almost there, y'all. For this, in fact, we might be there for this. We're not persisting the journal. Oh, this is this whole thing is for the inbound hook. We spent all this time like expanding the sending process. Oh goodness. But we still have to do the other side. Okay. And this is about the parsing. So we did this box here. We're sending the prompt. We've got it with the message IDs. We've got the idempotency stuff. Yay. I think that'll conclude what we do for the stream tonight. I am not going to be able to stream next week. I have some work trip planned, so I'm not going to be around to do that, unfortunately. But I should be around in a couple of weeks. And now that we have all of this stuff configured, we've got the subject properly there. We've got the account ID in the from line, so that when we actually do the response, or receive response, we should be able to parse that out. It should be pretty quick. Come back and do the actual parsing to persist the journal entry. So it's a pretty long journey to get to this point, but I think I had intended to be a little bit scrappier on what we were going to put in place, but there's a certain amount of discomfort I had on that of wanting to have that quality bar for myself. I'm going to be the user, and I don't want to receive multiple prompts. I don't want to like have it parsed incorrectly. I want the experience that I want. So I'm willing to wait a little bit more for quality and then build up. So that's going to call it for this evening. Thank you all for it's been some interesting conversation. Appreciate the questions. I will remind you all that if you want, you're welcome to join on Patreon to support me, or there's a YouTube subscriber section. But if you can't do those things, that's fine. I'm not really, it's not a money-making thing here for me to do this. I just appreciate you all having some good fun. But you could leave me a thumbs up or subscribe or comment. All of those things help with some visibility. They just kind of help get the video out there after I upload it. So thank you for joining in, and have a nice evening or morning wherever you are. Take care.